Okay, so if you had a chance to watch the first video, we talked about how to determine whether a relation or information that relates one value of x or one input value to a value of y, whether or not that's a function. And we saw when you have the mapping that if you have an input, in this case x, then it can only have one y value or output, which is shown in the second mapping, um, for each one. And the problem with the first one was that this 2 here was associated with -2 as well as 3. We could see it over here in the coordinate points. There was a 2 here. What was the y value? 3. Well, there was another 2 over here. However, it had a different value of y. It can only have one unique value. So that was the problem. Um, Graphically, if you look at a graph, you can see it right here. Both of these coordinate points have an x coordinate of 2, but there's more than one y value associated with that coordinate point of 2. So that means it's not a function. If you've got a table, let's see, I've got 2, it shows up twice here. What's the y value? 3. Okay, it should be 3 over here, but if it's a different number, it's not a function. So let's see if we can answer all the questions down here. This is a little bit different, but it is the same in a sense that it's a graph. So instead of showing a bunch of coordinate points, it's showing a continuous graph. What does that mean? It means that if we want to check a value of x, we would have to say, okay, well, what's the y value that goes with this x value? Well, we'd have to go up to this point right here, and it would be that. Now, we don't know exactly what it is because they don't have any grid marks, but it would be right there. The point is, if we need to see if it's a function, there better only be one y value associated with this x value. And there is, right? Because the line goes specifically right there. And so that means that it's a function. And I look over here and say, well, how about this x value over here? It's probably in the negative range for the x. Well, there's only one y value, so that's okay. So there is something called a vertical line test, where if you put a vertical line through a graph that's been written out, it should only go through once. That means there's only one y value with that particular value of x shown by the vertical line. That's okay. This is a function. Let me give you an example of something that's not a function. Let's say we have something like this. That's the y-axis and x. And it is something like this. Maybe it's a sideways parabola. Is that a function? Well, we could do the vertical line test to tell. We could say, can we put a vertical line through it and hit it in two places? If the answer is yes, then it's not a function. It goes through right here. So whatever that value of x is right there, let's say it's -2, it's got two different y values associated with it. This one right here and this one right here. That means it's not a function. So that's how you can tell whether it's a function. Okay, so we've already talked about how you can determine whether something's a function if it is a mapping with the ovals here. You check and see for every value of x or input value if it has more than one output value. Well, let's look at 0. Well, let's see, it has a value of 2 and it has a value of 3. That means it is not a non-function. It's only supposed to have one output value associated with it. 5, it only has one output associated with it. 4, same with 10. Now you may say, well, wait a minute, what about the 4? Doesn't that show that it's not a function either because there's two x values associated with it? No, that's fine. There's no problem there. Again, the problem is every input value should only have one output value associated with it. Okay, if we get coordinate points, then we look at all the first ones, which are the input values. And we see if any of them shows up more than once. 1, does it show up more than once? 3, more than once? Actually, they don't. As long as none of those show up more than once, it's definitely a function. However, let's say, for example, I'm not saying it happens here, but let's say the second point would have been 1, 8, for example. Then we would have said, okay, it shows up more than once here and here. Does it have only one output value? Well, here it would have 2 and 8. That would mean it's not a function. But again, that was an example. In this case, it's okay. There's no problem. Okay, so let's see. Finally, we get a table. Same thing over here. Does the input show up more than once? That's the first thing I look at. Here, it only shows up once. Each one of them only shows up once. There's no repeating x's. So that means it's automatically a function. Now, Example, if I would have got another one, let's just say it would have been 6 and 8, for example. If that would have happened, I would have looked at those two and said, hey, they're repeat. That could be okay if they have the same output, but if they have different outputs, then it would be non-function. But again, this is not one of the points, so based upon this, it is okay. So that's how you handle all 4 of these scenarios right here.